morning and a very warm welcome to this special broadcast brought to you by SABC News. This morning we're coming to you live from the International Convention Center here in Cape Town, and that is where the World Economic Forum has started in earnest. In a few minutes' time, President Jacob Zuma, together with a panel from the rest of the continent, will of course be doing that official opening of this particular forum. This is a forum where business, government, civil society gets together to look at some of the things that are impediments to the continent developing as it should. Now, various sessions looking at various aspects of Africa's development underway here, starting early this morning around 8:30. Lots of issues being raised around infrastructure development, what governments need to do, but also what the private sector, how the private sector can come in and help governments develop that infrastructure. A lot of the sessions are dealing, for example, with issues such as the regulatory framework. A lot of business people complaining that some of the governments in the continent aren't doing what they should, or there's a lot of uncertainty. In other words, today you wake up, the rules are like this, then the next morning those rules have changed. In the particular session where I went, countries such as Uganda and Zimbabwe were particularly mentioned, and business people talking about how improvements can be made. Well, those discussions are going to continue throughout the day and, of course, tomorrow. Right now, the official plenary, of course, is waiting for President Jacob Zuma and other members of his panel for the opening of this much important forum. Now, without much ado, I'm going to go back to just to give you a bit of background to this forum, but also some of the issues that are going to be or are being raised here, but also the background of where this continent of ours is coming from and where things are at the moment. Now, one of the interesting things to have preceded this particular forum this year is the release earlier this week of a report just around what the happenings, in other words, what has happened over the past year. Out of that report, which surveyed around 500 business people all over the world, to get a sense from them how difficult or easy it is to do business in the continent. A lot of them, an overwhelming majority of them, over 70%, saying actually the continent is doing well. And the interesting thing there is that those who are saying the continent is doing well are people who are already doing business in the continent. Now, if you contrast that with people who haven't done business with the continent at all, you find that there's a lot of negativity, there's a lot of skepticism, which then suggests that there is a perceptions problem that we haven't dealt with as a continent this far. So everyone right now, though, is looking forward to that plenary that is about to start. And instead of bringing you the inserts I was talking about, which give you a bit of that background, we're going to go straight to the plenary so that we don't waste any time and we don't go midway through that plenary. So without much ado, let's go straight to the plenary where people are expecting President Jacob Zuma, Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, and other guests to address the plenary session. Let's go straight there.
And a proud young global leader. And it is a great honor and privilege for me and my team of colleagues at the forum to be your hosts at this meeting. Allow me to begin by thanking you for taking time from your busy schedules to join this annual gathering of our broader African community and friends of Africa. I'd also like to thank the City of Cape Town, Government of South Africa, and people of South Africa for their warm welcome and outstanding collaboration that has made this year's meeting possible. We're also grateful to our co-chairs, Frans van Houten, Chief Executive Officer and Chairman, Royal Philips Electronics Netherlands, Mo Ibrahim, Chairman, Mo Ibrahim Foundation, United Kingdom, Mustafa Koch, Chairman of the Board, Koch Holding, Turkey, Franny Lotier, Executive Secretary, African Capacity Building Foundation, and also chair of a Global Agenda Council on Youth Employment, and Arif Nakbi, founder and Group Chief Executive, the Abraj Group from the United Arab Emirates. Thank you. As well as our 43 official partners for their dedicated support. Last week, as I was transiting through Frankfurt from our head office to come here for this meeting, an Eritrean lady approached me and said, "Excuse me for asking, are you Somalian?" Now, I'm accustomed to being mistaken for South African, based on my looks at home, here, inside and outside of Africa, or Kenyan, based on my accent, or from the Democratic Republic of Congo, based on my surname. Somalian was a first. She went on to explain that last year, when the late Prime Minister of Ethiopia passed away, she was searching for information on him and came across a website, the World Economic Forum, and she could swear that she saw someone exactly like me speaking Somali. So I laughed and confirmed that it was indeed me, and the language was Kiswahili, and it was basically a call traditionally issued before telling a riddle or a story. In honor of that lady and in memory of the late Prime Minister Zenawi, I beg your indulgence to repeat the tradition introduced last year. When I make the call, Kitendawili, you reply Tega, and what Tega means is go ahead. Kitendawili. More energy. Kitendawili. Excellent. As I mentioned at the welcome reception last evening, we're off to a flying start. This year, we have an unprecedented and unparalleled number of participants attending across all stakeholder groups, which I believe is a recognition not only of the high levels of interest this region is attracting across the globe, but also of the growing credibility and sophistication of the region's own businesses, civil society groups, and political leaders. Let me share some numbers. Over 1,000 participants from over 80 countries globally. Over 50% of these participants come from across Africa from 41 countries. A total of 12 current heads of state or government from Benin, Ghana, Kenya, Malawi, Mauritius, Nigeria, South Africa, of course, Swaziland, Tanzania, Togo, Uganda, and Zimbabwe, as well as 3 former heads of state or government from Cape Verde, Mozambique, and the United Kingdom. We are truly Pan-African. Women participation is up to 22%, and this year, 1/3 of all speaking roles will feature women. That's another big feat. We're not fully there, but we're on our way. We also have unprecedented attendance by young global leaders, global shapers, social entrepreneurs, civil society leaders or NGO leaders, labor union leaders, academic leaders, media leaders, religious leaders, and cultural leaders, reflecting our multi-stakeholder spirit. As you are aware, the forum is about more than bringing people together. It's also about creating a platform for all our stakeholders' communities to collectively discuss and agree on how to work together to make Africa a better place for all. This year's theme, Delivering on Africa's Promise, is essentially a call for action, focused on 3 key priorities. 1, accelerating economic diversification. According to the World Bank, African countries still incur a food import bill of $25 billion annually, of which only $1 billion is traded within African countries. This needs to change. 2, boosting strategic infrastructure. Only 12% of Africa's trade is within Africa. This compares to 60% in the European Union and 40% in Asia. This too needs to change. 3, unlocking Africa's talent. By 2015, Africa will be the youngest continent in the world, and by 2040, Africa will have a larger workforce than China. What an opportunity. With such an august gathering, we are confident that you will be able to meet the expectations of Africa's citizens. The journey has begun, and yesterday, many of you participated in sessions where you took stock of progress made over the past year with respect to ongoing initiatives such as the Grow Africa Partnership Initiative related to agriculture, the Africa Strategic Infrastructure Initiative, the Water Resource Groups Initiative that's been very successful in South Africa and is now spreading to East and West Africa, and the Green Growth Action Alliance. A final note is that given how Pan-African we have become, we have increased the integration of French this year and introduced Portuguese interpretation for some sessions. All plenary and TV debate sessions will be live streamed to the world at large in both English and French. Without further delay, let me now introduce our eminent panelists for our opening plenary entitled Building with BRICS. I begin with the far end with Donald Kaberuka, President of the African Development Bank and Chair of the Global Agenda Council on Africa. Navin Jindal, Chairman, Jindal Steel and Power in India, also a young global leader alumnus. Madame Nkosazana Clarisse Dlamini Zuma, Chairperson, first female Chairperson of the African Union Commission from Addis Ababa. David Lipton, first Deputy Managing Director from the International Monetary Fund in Washington, D.C., and our main host, His Excellency Jacob Zuma, President of South Africa. This session will be chaired by Professor Klaus Schwab, Founder and Executive Chairman of the World Economic Forum. Over to you, Professor Schwab.
Thank you very much, Elsie Kansa, and thank you for being such a great ambassador, I should say, not only inside the Forum for Africa, but around the world. For me, personally, this meeting is a very special one. It is the 23rd World Economic Forum on Africa, and actually the first two had taken place in Geneva. And it's exactly, Mr. President, it's exactly 20 years ago that the World Economic Forum held its first meeting on African soil here in Cape Town, and practically at the same time in May. And if I look back, I have to say how much Africa has changed. The attitude, the spirit, and of course, today, as we heard so many times, Africa is a continent of promise. But we should not forget that if you take the GDP participation of Africa on global GDP, today it's 3%. Now, if you take the population of Africa and you relate it to the world population, it should be around 15%. It shows the gap, but it shows also the promise. And here, during this meeting, we want to highlight the opportunities which Africa is offering. And today we are starting with this plenary session, which is mainly devoted to the BRICS. And, Mr. President, you are not only a member of the G20, but you have been a member, you are now a member of the BRICS countries, and you have been the host of a very important BRICS summit recently in Durban. But before you take the floor, I would like to thank you personally, because having established a partnership with your country, expressed in your great hosting this event, your government, the population of South Africa. We are very grateful for this, I would say, friendship which has been established between your country and the World Economic Forum. But coming back to my question, Your Excellency, what is the impact of your belonging to the BRICS on Africa, on your country, and of course on Africa at large?
Well, thank you very much indeed, Professor. Thank you for coming once again to South Africa, to Cape Town, and really welcome my colleagues and everyone who's here. It's such a wonderful, warm spirit that we feel, and vibrancy. As you say, Africa is changing. The very fact that we had the BRICS summit, I think it indicates the kind of change. I believe that the membership of South Africa to BRICS represents, I think, a very important turning point to Africa's economic activities and connectivity to the globe. You are all aware that many major events in the centuries have bypassed Africa. Africa seemed not to be existing when the world was active in many ways. This time around, I think the BRICS link indicates that Africa cannot be bypassed by the events that are changing the landscape economically and politically and socially of the world. The fact that we have one of the African countries being a member of BRICS in the name of South Africa. Our belief, and it's not just the belief of South Africa only, I think all countries, is that the membership of South Africa to BRICS represents the 1 billion people in the continent of Africa. That, I think, was clearly demonstrated by what happened in the summit here. We have had summits in the BRICS ever since we were members of BRICS, but when we came to South Africa, a good number of African heads of states came to participate along the BRICS summit to discuss, I think, for the first time, that emerging economies, very huge economies, as a collective of BRICS, had a moment to interact with the African heads of states, those in particular who lead the economic regions of the continent, as well as those who lead NEPAD and other leaders, to discuss what Africa today is discussing in terms of the need for integration of the economic regions and activities in the continent, as well as the infrastructure to help present a good platform for intertrade in the continent. Africa says time has come to change. And of course, as you know, if we talk about the integration of the economy, if we talk about the infrastructure, which is championed by a number of heads of states, it indicates that Africa's attitude towards itself and towards how it should interact with the world has changed. Of course, as you know, one of the major problems would be, how do you finance the infrastructure so that you are able to move forward? That summit helped to create that interaction between the representative of the leadership of the continent and BRICS. In other words, Africa could today, unlike in the past, we could say in the past, come, invest in Africa, there are possibilities. But it would not be easy to really look at them and say, here are these possibilities. I think BRICS leadership found it very pleasing that Africa could say, here are specific projects that Africa is presenting to investors. And I think that meeting was very, very useful. Firstly, the unified voice of the African leaders on the issues that need to be prioritized, but also for those who have the means to be able to look at the case presented by Africa and say, we are ready to respond. It was an important one, and I think taking it from BRICS even to this World Economic Forum, I think Africa has a story to tell, has a presentation to make. This, I think, says Africa has changed. But it also says a lot to the South, developing countries, that this grouping, BRICS, is presenting an organized voice within the broader section of the South, that we are in a better position to present this. And it also, the interaction between Africa and BRICS, it brings an organized interaction so that the relationship is not haphazard, is not all over, is well organized, so that whatever we are able to benefits all of us in the continent of Africa. I think it represents a different level of Africa's development, particularly if you take into account that Africa is one of the regions that is fast developing economically. And therefore, I think African leaders are saying, for the first time, let us organize ourselves, let us talk to the kind of organizations that will respond very positively and very effectively to what we think needs to be done in our continent. So we're very happy that we're able to organize that kind of interaction of BRICS and the leaders in the continent of Africa. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. I think it's very important what you just told us. BRICS is not just an accumulation of 5 important countries. It is a symbolic and a real expression of the great transformation taking place in the world with the transfer of economic and political power from the north to the south and from the west to the east. Now, David Lipton, you are the Deputy Managing Director of the IMF. How do you react to what you just heard from the President, and how, in the framework of the global outlook of the IMF, how do you see the BRICS and particularly also Africa?
Thank you. First, let me, Klaus, thank you for inviting me here, and President Zuma, thank you so much for the hospitality South Africa has shown. I think that the role of the BRICS can be very much a new factor and an important positive factor here. First, on the economies of the region, the economies of sub-Saharan Africa have been generating growth now, strong growth, for over 15 years. And this is a coming together of a set of events, the end of the ideological strife in Africa, the clear political direction on economic issues to promote stability and promote growth, the experienced generation of policymakers who are doing such a good job, and the new factor, information technology, computers, phones that are allowing Africa to span distances. Remoteness, after all, has been one of the most difficult broad problems for Africa. Africa now faces, it's interesting that Africa's progress was not derailed by this financial crisis. We've written a paper, I'll give an advertisement for Chapter 4 of our World Economic Outlook that just came out, looking at the question, is this a false dawn? Is African growth going to stall? And our conclusion after looking at this quite seriously is that this growth is robust and we expect it to continue. Africa also obviously has a huge amount of remaining challenges, and that, I think, is where the BRICS come in. Africa, of course, has relied very heavily on advanced economy markets, and now advanced economy markets are stalled and not providing the kind of engine that they have in the past. And so the role for BRICS, and not just BRICS, but other middle-income countries, I think is substantial. Let's approach it for a second by asking what do countries need that the BRICS could provide? They need macroeconomic stability, strong financial systems, trade, and investment. And I think BRIC countries can contribute in a range of areas. Let me use as an illustration, I was in Mozambique before coming to South Africa, and to me the Mozambican situation and story tells the picture. First, Mozambique has discovered huge natural resources. They need companies to help them extract those resources. Already there's a big Brazilian company involved, and other BRIC companies can become involved. They then need to turn all of those resources into productive assets. They need to build infrastructure. They are in the process of they're already a port for South Africa, but those facilities need to be upgraded. They can become a port for landlocked countries to the west, but that will require infrastructure. They have 78% of the population still in agriculture, many living in remote areas that need agricultural access roads. BRIC countries can help with the infrastructure. They need to enhance agricultural productivity. Who knows about enhancing agricultural productivity? Brazil, India. And along the way, they need to build the capacity to be able to do those things well. And BRIC countries have gone through dealing with those challenges. So I think there's a lot of room for help in terms of technical assistance, capacity building, and so on. This will be hard. Mozambique's also an example of how difficult the challenge is with with substantial income disparity, very poor people living in remote areas, poverty, lack of skills, the need for an education system. The challenges will be very great. I think BRIC countries, their companies, their governments can play a very important role, as can other middle-income countries, helping African countries develop, helping them integrate so that eventually they can help each other, and as Klaus started out by saying, in essence helping sub-Saharan Africa get on the convergence path with income levels that rise and start heading towards the levels that are experienced in more developed countries.
Thank you very much, David. Dr. Kaberuka, President Zuma mentioned already infrastructure, the significance of infrastructure. David Lipton referred to his experience in Mozambique. You are at the core in financing also infrastructure, and it plays a big role, infrastructure, inside our program those days. Could you comment on how infrastructure development in Africa could be accelerated, and particularly the role of BRICS also in this respect?
Thank you, Klaus. But could I just add a small point to what President Zuma said? I think our relationship with the BRICS is about all those things. But I think one of the most fundamental ones is the experience of development. Some of these countries were poor not long ago, and they have come to where they are by a combination of policies and some choice in investment. I think that is important for Africa as well, because for a long time we have struggled with how does development happen, and we thought there was a model out there which can be imported. Now we know that development happens in many different ways. So if you look at this G20, all the countries on the table have reached development from different angles. Some from laissez-faire capitalism, others welfare capitalism, others by state capitalism, others by muddling through. I think all those experiences are very important for us as well. Now coming to your question, Klaus, I think this is our take. This is a very exciting moment in Africa. There are many problems around inequalities, inclusion, that kind of issues we have to deal with. However, the fact is, if you take many regions of Africa, ECOWAS, for example, because I can see President of Nigeria is here, the GDP of ECOWAS has multiplied 5 times in the last 20 years. If you look at the per capita income in Africa now, I know that's an average, well, for the first time crossed the $1,000 per person barrier. That is significant. That is significant. Now, there are issues around inclusion, inequalities, as I say. We have to come to that. Now, there are some risks to this momentum in Africa. As I was saying yesterday in another panel, I think the first risk is politics. We have to fix our politics, ensure that combat for politics occurs in a manner which keeps development going. Number 2 is the global economy, because we're not an island. Number 3 is infrastructure. In other words, reducing the costs of doing business. because poor infrastructure adds about 40% to the cost of doing business on the continent and trading. So we have come to a point where now a lot of progress has been made, but now we have to come to scale. Every power of connectivity of transport. Now, how do we bring this to scale? The first thing is to look at ourselves. It can't just be the BRICS. We, in our own countries, by better mobilization of resources, our savings in our countries, in our regions, across the continent. That is why the African Development Bank, in its new 10-year strategy, which we discussed with Dr. Zuma here in Addis not long ago in the context of this 50th anniversary, we are trying to launch a special vehicle, a special initiative for Africa itself to mobilize our own resources for infrastructure. Because we are sitting on resources on this continent, and I think that is the place to begin. Because we can no longer depend on foreign aid for this kind of thing. Having done that, we have now to look for partnership with other countries. Now, that partnership is not only for the BRICS, it has to be with other countries as well, but mainly the BRICS. And I think here, at I think the G20 summit in Korea, I think President Zuma, if you recall, the Prime Minister of India gave a very good idea. He said, look, among some of the BRICS countries, you have got huge surpluses, which are destabilizing currencies elsewhere in the world. Why don't we figure out how to recycle some of those surpluses in high-return African infrastructure? Not as grants or as gifts, but we identify projects on the African continent within PIDA, which are high return, and we figure out a mechanism to get those surpluses into this infrastructure. Then a high-level panel was put in place, chaired by Thiam, under the French G20 presidency, but we have not gone far. I think we have to pick this again. And I think the creation of this bank, which was discussed in Durban, was a very good thing as a vehicle. I think we could work together with other African institutions, in particular the African Development Bank, to intermediate those resources and increase investment in infrastructure. Now, I was a bit disappointed, though, President Zuma, that the BRIC Bank, I think I was hoping for a much more ambitious instrument. I think I had figures of 50 billion. That is too small, because the African Development Bank itself, our size, is $100 billion capital. And I'm hoping the BRICS Bank can be more ambitious, maybe 5 times our size. But surely they cannot come in with 50 billion. It'll be too small, too small. But assuming that the BRIC Bank is an ambitious vehicle, which I hope it is, I know you are pushing that very much, I think there is opportunity here for us to cooperate, not as grants, not as gifts, but to invest in infrastructure on the continent, which will then increase trade opportunities for ourselves, but also trade opportunities between us and the BRICS.
I would like to go back immediately to President Zuma and ask him, this concept of the BRICS Development Bank is such an important concept. What will you and can you do to make sure that this bank becomes soon a reality?
Well, thank you once again. The bank is going to be soon a reality. As you know, the BRICS summit in Durban took a very firm decision to establish the bank. And finance ministers have been instructed to work on the details of it. There are important issues that need to be considered because we certainly, part of the reason we thought it was important to establish the bank is because we needed a bank that could respond to the challenges and the needs of the developing world, not just BRICS only. The bank is about the developing countries that the BRICS is establishing. So the decision has been taken. I think there are just 2 issues, besides other details that would be worked on. The issue of how do we capacitate, in other words, how do we capitalize the bank by the members of BRICS? That is an issue that the finance ministers are discussing, because we want to capacitated so that it is able to address the immediate needs that the developing countries have, with a different approach to the well-established old banks, which at times, if you wanted to deal with your matters as quickly as possible, the bureaucracy is rather a little bit slow for those who are in need. That's one of the issues that they are looking at. How do we capitalize it? Because we don't want just a bank that will not be able to respond to the huge challenges. Secondly, its domicile. Where will it be? And Africa is very interested that the bank must be in Africa. Every other thing is outside this African continent. And Africa feels we need this bank to be established here, particularly because the greater need of the bank certainly is in the continent of Africa. In the next summit, I'm sure we'll be getting a report about the two issues that have raised and other issues. And then there will be a very clear decision, because the BRICS members understand the need, the urgent need of the bank to be operational as quickly as possible. So it will be, I'm sure, in the next, which will be held, I think, in Brazil, there will be a report that says, what do we do? Because the decision has been taken. It's a question of how do we capacitate it, where will it be located, and what are other kind of things that go with what the bank should do.
David, just a short word. You are representing one of the traditional Bretton Woods organizations, and of course the World Bank is one of the three organizations, and you are one. Do you see it as a complementary move or as a competition?
Oh, I think it's a complementary move. We surely see the need for mobilizing infrastructure investment. We've studied that at the request of the G20, in which the BRICS all participate, and identified the need. And I think it's complementary and will be complementary to the fine work of the African Development Bank as well.
Yeah. Let's come to the role of private business also in infrastructure development. And you, Naveen Jindal, you are a member of the Indian Parliament, representing 2 million constituents, but you are also a well-known business leader and one of our young global leaders. How do you see how you could contribute to the infrastructural development, not only in your country, which is very much in need of better infrastructure, but of Africa?
Thank you, Mr. Schwab, for inviting me here. And I also like to take this opportunity to thank President Zuma for his hospitality, and also for providing leadership in promoting cooperation between Africa and BRICS. So the question, we see lots and lots of opportunities in Africa, in the whole of Africa, and these are all the areas where the BRICS countries also have lots of challenges and have also learned a lot from their experiences of the last few decades. So obviously we've all been speaking about challenges of infrastructure here, but those very challenges also are opportunities in development of infrastructure, may that be building of roads, railways, ports. Africa is blessed with so much of natural resources. But the point is, how do we exploit it for development of Africa? And this is a window of opportunity. These minerals are valuable today. They may not be valuable after 50 years or 100 years. So one has to be able to use these natural resources for the development of this great continent. And then opportunities, whether it's agriculture, whether it is education, health. So learning from the experiences of BRICS countries, I think those very experiences can be very well suited to Africa. So we are looking at many such opportunities here. Most of the African countries that we have seen are having acute shortage of power. And they're running mostly on diesel generating sets, heavy furnace oil, and the cost of power anywhere is from 30 to 50 cents. And one could very easily, through various ways, whether it's solar or wind, renewable, or even coal-fired, provide power from 10 cents to 15 cents. And I think power is something, is a basic enabler for everything, whether it's education or agriculture or health. One just cannot do without power. So and I think where there's an opportunity, and people are already buying power at very high prices. So I just feel that the time has come that when all these infrastructure projects are going to take off in Africa, and these do provide great opportunities in all the countries, even BRICS countries, and especially in Africa. So I think these are real opportunities here, and whoever, obviously there are risks also involved, and what needs to be done by these countries is to have model power purchase agreements which are bankable, which are fair to both parties, which are transparent, and in an open bidding environment, so that one could get the best prices of power especially. And I think with power, and already there has been a revolution in mobile telephony all over Africa, and the whole of Africa is benefiting from the mobile revolution, mobile telephone revolution. Similarly, a similar revolution needs to take place in infrastructure, especially power generation and transmission. Transmission and connectivity of various regions, various countries with each other, so that surplus power from one country, and it has been happening in local regions, especially in southern Africa, SADC region, it has to happen more all over Africa. And I think this would tremendously help Africa grow, realize its true potential, and also offer opportunities to countries and companies investing in these projects.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Suma, the African Union, which you chair, just celebrated its 50th anniversary, so congratulations. I think it's also the moment not only to look back and to look at the present issues and challenges, but to look very much forward, as we all do, of course. But what is your vision for, I wouldn't dare to say for the next 50 years, but at least for the next 10 years? Can you share with us your longer-term vision of Africa?
Thank you very much. Indeed, we are celebrating our 50th anniversary, starting on the 25th of May this month. And we have decided to celebrate for the whole year, and I'll come to the reason why. And the way we are going to celebrate is to look back just for a moment, to look at our achievements, learn lessons from what we didn't do well, and take care of our present situation, and then spend more time looking into the future. We think that in the next 50 years, Africa should be described as a prosperous continent at peace with itself. We think it's achievable. We are looking at what assets does Africa have that will propel it to this prosperous Africa at peace with itself. And I'll mention a few of those assets. Some have been mentioned, but we think our most precious and most abundant asset is our people. We have to invest in our people. Investing in our people means they must be healthy, so investing in health, but also in education and skills, science and technology, research, innovation. If you look at Singapore, for instance, Singapore, maybe 1960 was at the same level as Jamaica in terms of per capita income. But they don't have many natural resources, but they concentrated on skilling their people. And now they are at more than $29,000 per capita. So we have that resource, and we have it in abundance, and we are going to be growing, and it's going to be a young population for a long time, energetic, creative, and innovative. So if we invest in them, we think prosperity is in sight. But agriculture, South Africa is bigger than, in Africa we can fit the United States, we can fit China, we can fit India, we can fit Western Europe, there'll be still space for Japan. So we are a huge continent, and that means looking at the world, looking at the available arable land, 60% is still available unused in Africa. And that has a huge potential if we invest in agriculture. And investing in agriculture will mean not only food for us, but it will also mean food for the world. We will sell food to the world, but we can also create jobs for our people, not only in the immediate agricultural sector, but in the processing of agricultural products. So we can create more jobs, and we can export processed food, and we can get more revenue from that. The other asset has been mentioned, mineral and natural resources. I won't go into it because it has been mentioned. Suffice to say, of course, it can also assist us in industrializing. It has to work for the benefit of our people. Developing infrastructure will also increase our growth, but the absence of infrastructure is a constraint to growth. So infrastructure in transport, why can't we have infrastructure that links all our capitals? That's part of integration. It's possible by rail, by road, and using modern infrastructure. We can't start where the Industrial Revolution started. There's new technologies. When we talk trains, why can't we speak trains? And I think it's possible. We must set our minds to it. It's possible. And of course, energy. At the moment, we're producing we're generating the same amount of energy as Spain in sub-Saharan Africa. And Spain, we have 20 times more people than Spain has in sub-Saharan Africa. And half of that energy is in one country where we are. So there is a huge potential in energy. And of course, in telecommunications, it's been mentioned that we are now the second biggest market for mobile telephones, second to Asia. But why can't we use that also for education? Why can't we use internet to have massive programs of education? It's possible, we should do it. And I think looking at the young population and looking at women, if we can get the young people and the women in all our human endeavor, then this continent is poised to be amongst the greatest in the world in the next 50 years. And it's possible. It can be done. And of course, we need partnerships. Partners, the way we're going to celebrate, I said I'll come back to why we're celebrating for the whole year. Our celebration for the whole year is going to our population, to business, to youth, to women, to the artists, to everyone, to say, where do you want Africa to be in 50 years? What are the steps that need to be taken? And what is your role that you are going to play in getting there? So our business people should be defining where they want to be, what their role, what steps, and all our people, because Africa's development cannot be only the business of governments. It has to be the business of its citizens as well. And so we'd like to use this year, this celebration, to energize, to galvanize our people to be part of this vision, which we call Africa 2063, which will see Africa prosperous and at peace with itself. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Suma. I would like to use this opportunity just to highlight that we are here assembled not only to discuss those issues, but to make real progress. And in this context, I would like to thank you for the great partnership. We just ended the special meeting on the Pro-Africa initiative. We had very concrete discussions on the infrastructure. Thank you for letting
the kind of the understanding that the Africans themselves have today and the commitment to move forward. In 50 years, we would like to see Africa as she has been describing it, the Africa that will be connected totally, the Africa that will be economically very viable, the Africa that will be at peace with itself, where there will be not a single area of conflict, the Africa with a population that will be empowered with education, that therefore will be playing a role to ensure that Africa moves on all the time. We would want to see Africa that is able, at the 50 years time, that is able to utilize its own resources to develop itself and to trade with the world at the equal level. I think it is very possible. Because if you take the 50 years since it was established to where we are today, we are almost at a point of launching Africa into very great activities to achieve the prosperous continent. So we would like to see Africa, we should be self-sufficient in everything. And that is a possibility. The chair was talking about the modern transport, for an example. I think we should, 50 years' time, we should have a situation that not just by plane, on the ground, that in few hours we should be in every capital that we wanted to be. So that's Africa we're working for, and I think the potential is huge. The possibility is there, and the commitment. That's part of the reason we're working very hard to ensure that we rid the African continent of the conflicts that you have. Because you cannot develop Africa to what we want it to be, or we wish it to be in 50 years, if there are pockets of problems and conflict. That's why we are putting more effort on those kind of issues. That is why our interaction with our friends and partners and the call for support to address those issues are an important one. Because as long as we have conflict, development and conflict do not go together. So we've got to stop and get rid of conflict in order for us to have the kind of Africa we would want to have in 50 years' time.
Dr. Kaberuka, you made a very interesting distinction in your comments. The distinction between welfare capitalism, state capitalism, and laissez-faire capitalism. What do you see as the leitmotif, if I may say so, for Africa in its development?
Now, Klaus, you put me in a fix because I began by saying there's no mode of development. For a long time, we thought there was a mode one could go in the peak of the shelf. It doesn't work like that. So, Chinese have found what works for them. So did the Indians, the Koreans, the Scandinavians, and others. I'm only saying that we Africans, from our own experience, learning by doing, we can go a step further. I cannot suggest here that we shall follow any particular model, but that is a mistake we have made in the past, trying to copy things which happens elsewhere. So I think that it will happen the way it has happened in other places. There will be a mixture of all those models. clearly some degree of social protection is needed. We don't want world West capitalism where there's no social protection. But on the other hand, market forces have to be allowed to flourish. Market forces will not flourish if the state is not doing what it should do. So I think it will be a combination of all those things together. This is what will get us where our leaders are saying. I think, for me, the next 50 years should at least try to banish what has been Africa's factor undermining our pride, dependency on foreign aid. It cannot be that in the next 50 years we're still financing our development based on other people's taxation. We have to figure out how to use the extensive resources of this continent for its own transformation. And that cannot happen if we are balkanized as we are. This is why I agree with Madam Zuma and Mr. President there that we have to come together. We have to build the infrastructure, use our resources more optimally. Look, yesterday we were discussing in a panel how it is so difficult for Africans to move inside Africa. You go to Europe with your Schengen visa, you go from country to country. But here, even me, President of the African Development Bank, to go to some countries, I need a visa. I have to go around, but I'm going there to help with development. So let us allow our own talents to flourish. Let us use our own resources. Let us ensure that we unlock the potential of this continent. That is what will give pride to our children and grandchildren, to ensure that Africa in the next 50 years is playing its part in trade and investment like other parts of the world. Look, 30 years ago, China was a very poor country. I was a graduate student, so it's in our lifetime. 20 years ago, India was a very poor country. All of us, some of us were still maybe already in our mid-careers. I think that we can transform this continent within one generation if the things Madam Zuma was saying, Mr. President, do happen. It is possible.
Well, Donald Kaberuka, who is the president of the Development Bank, of the African Development Bank, making some salient points there, talking about how Africa should look at its own resources for development and stop the practice of having to develop the continent using other people's taxes and so on, but also making some interesting comments there about the much talked about BRICS Bank, saying $50 billion is really nothing. They should have gone for a much more ambitious amount than that. Well, interesting comments that are set to get tongues wagging here. A lot of comments and criticism is going to come. Well, Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma talking about continent's need to sort of rely on its own resources, talking about 60% of arable land actually lying unused. That land can be used for agriculture purposes, for the benefits of our own people, but also for the continent to be able to export food. Well, those conversations, of course, continue well into this afternoon and tomorrow. Catch us again on our bulletins, lunch hour bulletins on SABC 3 and SABC 1, but also in the evening during our bulletins. We are with this story. For now, though, it's back to the studio.